Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and today we'll be taking a look at another Kickstarter game. I've had the pleasure of being provided an early look at the Tyrant's Conquest game, currently live on Kickstarter. So today I'll be giving my thoughts on the game and who I believe should back it. Now, first things out of the way, I have been provided this early review copy of the game for free, but no money has been provided. They are not a sponsor of the channel, this review has not been paid for, and I am free to say exactly what I think. That said, it is never my goal to tank someone's dream. Especially with a Kickstarter game, I want to find the things a game does well, as even if they aren't traits that I prefer, one of the 20 of you might find that it appeals to you. I won't shy away from telling you when I see issues, but if I could find nothing redeemable about the game, I wouldn't be spending the time to make a full video. This review will consist of 4 parts. First, I'll present the game itself, its goals and mechanics as neutrally as I can, the goal being to give you the basic understanding of the game's fundamentals. I won't cover every rule or go into intense detail here. This is an overview, not a tutorial. After that, I will give my initial impressions on what we've seen so far. This is where I will highlight specific things that I believe are potential strengths and weaknesses of the game on first read. These are meant to be the gut reactions to the game before any actual testing is done. The way that you might feel about the game after having read through the rules in preparation for running your first game. Only then will we enter part 3, where I run characters through some testing of mechanics via a tournament of champions, pitting different builds against each other in different situations. The results of this will be mentioned as part of the review, but the actual testing itself is done over on our Twitch channel. So if you'd like to watch live in the future, you can follow us at twitch.tv/rpgblender. Otherwise, I'll have a highlight reel available here, assuming it's done. If there's no card, well, make sure you've subscribed so you know once it goes live. Finally, after getting to try out the mechanics, I will discuss how my opinions have been altered, which of my concerns have been proven wrong or upheld, and if there are any unexpected areas of joy or misery which came from the tests. This will lead to my final recommendation regarding the game. Would I back it? And more importantly, what groups of gamers do I think should consider it? So now, let's get started with this look at an upcoming game, Tyrant's Conquest. Tyrant's Conquest is a new system filled with 81 classes and unique methods of casting. With simultaneous rounds and the ability to hand design your perfect character, you won't be trapped in a role you don't wish to play. If you couldn't guess, the largest point being sold with this game is how customizable character creation is. So let's start there. Character creation meets some familiar goals: assigning attributes, choosing class and race, learning skills, and purchasing gear. A chief difference being that this is primarily a D100 based system, so you can expect numbers will be getting a bit higher than you may be used to. Players roll or use point buy to assign their 7 statistics with values between 20 and 40. These values can be adjusted depending on race and background. As with other systems, you have both an attribute score and modifier. The modifier is a bit simpler to get than some other systems, being just the digit in the tens place of the attribute. So with an attribute score of 38, your modifier would be 3. From there, you choose one of 5 tier 0 classes to begin your character growth. Class levels are purchased by spending XP, with higher tier classes costing more to gain a level in. As long as you meet the requirements for a class and have the required XP, you can level in any class you choose. Classes provide you with health, mana, combat modifiers, as well as special abilities, talents. With 81 classes spread across the 6 tiers, the idea of character growth is to build exactly what you want through mixing and matching them. You do not need to take any class to its conclusion, though you do need to take the levels in order, of course. So you have your character. How do you actually use it? In most cases, you will roll a D100, then add a relevant attribute modifier. In the case of a skill check, you would also add your ranks in the appropriate skill. If you get lucky and roll multiples of 10, that is an explosion. Note the number rolled, then roll another D100. You then add both numbers together to get your final score. Less common are crits. For every 50 that your roll exceeds the target by, you gain or increase your critical multiplier. So if you succeed in hitting someone by more than 50, you deal double damage. At 100, you deal triple, 150 is quadruple, and so on. This is the general roll mechanic, but you'll see variations on this in other specialty areas. Now, the next item of note is combat. As mentioned, this system uses simultaneous combat rounds, so everyone decides what they're going to do up front, and then the GM adjudicates all actions at the same time. All actions decided on at the beginning of the round will happen. The actions of one combatant will not prevent the actions of another. So your turn will not be wasted due to the person you were fighting deciding they want to walk away from you when you didn't prep any movement actions. You will get your parting shot in as they move away. As for what you can do in combat, this game does away with the D&D style of action, movement, and bonus. Instead, each character gets a certain number of action points every round, which they can spend on whatever they wish to do. Moving, attacking, casting a spell, etc. If an action takes more AP than they have, they can begin it and may continue to spend AP toward that action in future rounds. Characters begin with 2 AP and will gain more as they spend XP to level up, eventually capping out at 10 AP after spending 100 million XP. At the start of combat, every character rolls initiative, which is 1d10 plus their perception modifier and the speed of their weapon. This does not affect the events of the combat round. Instead, it only serves to determine who, if anyone, is caught off guard, and to then provide an order for people to determine what they will do. So the person with the highest initiative spends their AP first, but their actions still happen at the same time as everyone else's. If someone should roll 10 higher than their opponent, they get a surprise round, during which the opponent cannot act. When you try to hit someone, you roll your D100 and add to it your ranged or melee hit bonus, and any other extra bonuses you might possess. You then compare that to your target's evasion value. If your roll beats their evasion, you hit and deal damage equal to your weapon's damage plus your strength. Bring your opponent to 0 health, and they can make a single death save of a D100 plus Constitution score. On a target of 100, pass and you instead hit 1 hit point and are unconscious. Fail and you are dead. This roll may only be made once per day. Okay, enough combat, let's move on to the magic. Magic falls into 2 areas, spellcasting and channeling. Let's talk spellcasting first. As characters level up, they may gain access to various schools of magic. Each school has a list of spells broken out into tiers. Continuing to improve along a spellcasting class may increase the tier of spells that you have access to. To cast a spell, you must spend both a mana cost and AP, the amounts of which are determined by the spell you are casting. If the spell costs more AP than you have, it will take multiple rounds to cast. Once you spend enough AP, you spend the mana, and the effect occurs immediately unless otherwise stated. The effect of a spell always happens. There is no attack roll for most spells, though some do allow resistance rolls to avoid an ongoing effect. Channeling follows a similar structure but without mana. Instead of a mana cost, you have an energy cost. You do not inherently start with energy. Instead, you may spend AP during combat to build energy of your chosen type, divine, natural, or essence. This built energy dissipates at the end of the next round, so you must balance spending AP to build energy with the AP costs of the effect you wish to channel. Okay, so those are the very simple basics of the game. Let's talk about my initial impressions. Beginning with the book itself, I need to note that this is a very early copy of the game. This means we can expect some readability issues, so I can't be too harsh on that. But I do need to say that the book will benefit greatly from an editor. It is a bit difficult to understand what is intended with certain rules as written. As an example, for combat, you are limited in how many attacks you can make per round. The basic attack rule details that you can only attack as many times as your class allows. However, classes do not specify a number of attacks they get. Instead, it is noted in the levels when they gain an additional attack. Okay, So we would assume then that you are limited to 1 per round until you receive an extra one. Except if we look at the quick character examples for, say, the Rogue Tier 0 class, which gets no extra attacks, it is listed as having 2 attacks. Well, that makes sense, I suppose. You start with 2 AP, so starting with 2 attacks makes some sense. However, you then look at the Warrior Tier 0 class, who receives 2 extra attacks while leveling, and the quick level 10 character has 3 attacks. So is the error with the Rogue that all characters start with base 1 attack, or with the Warrior that it should have 4 attacks per round? Now this is just one example, but there were a number of similar issues where I found myself needing to look at examples, reread things multiple times, or flip between multiple sections of the documents. I ended up eventually opening it multiple times just so I could have one which I could use to look up whatever rule needed to be cross-referenced. So yes, the book needs cleaning up, but that's to be expected. It is more of a living document right now. When it comes to character creation, I'm enjoying what I see on the large scale. The classes don't seem overly restrictive in terms of qualifications, allowing you to actually get to mix and match them. And I'm reminded of days spent looking through prestige classes in the days of 3rd edition, mixing them up to make some hybrid beastie. And honestly, even the progression within classes is very reminiscent of this era of D&D. However, it seems some effort needs to be put into balancing the background options. There are some choices that are just strictly better than others. Now this makes sense when you're building it out to be purely random, but in this case, you are given the option to do it randomly or to choose what you want. So when given the choice, why would I ever choose the background that does nothing but take most of my starting cash when there is an option that just gives you 500 XP? That's enough to gain 5 levels in your Tier 0 class. These options need to be balanced to have pros and cons for every option, or it needs to be something which is purely randomized, a press your luck option for people at the table. I'm also a bit concerned about how balanced the 5 Tier 0 classes are at level 1. It seems as if the Neophyte, Channeler, and Warrior are much more front-loaded with good stuff, while the Apprentice and Rogue are lacking. Heck, the Rogue doesn't even have a proficiency with a single weapon until level 2, and even then they need to use one of their talents to get it, limiting the customization options. The Channeler or Neophyte also don't start with weapons, of course, but they get magic. So I'll be interested to see how a level 1 Rogue checks out when compared with the other classes. For the base mechanics, they seem fine. It's a simple roll and add system at its core, nothing breaking ground nor broken itself. But it does seem like multiples of 10 are what matters most in the game, so I do wonder if it was really necessary to go for a 100 base rather than 10. A base 10 would result in considerably lower numbers, which would be more accessible. And I'm wondering just how over the top these numbers will get. Looking at the recovery mechanics, for instance, it's nothing so simple as a full restore on a long rest or even a percentage. Instead, you have a calculation based on your level and a relevant ability that tells you how much HP or mana you get back. Looking at HP, you get your total level times your constitution modifier times the highest tier of class you have. Perhaps you see an issue there? That's right, your first class is Tier 0. So technically, by this formula, you cannot regain HP by resting until you get your first Tier 1 class. Now, I'm pretty sure that isn't intended, as the example adds 1 to the tier multiplier, but that makes an even less friendly thing to remember. One of a good number of rolling formulas you'll need to remember or reference throughout a play session. With combat, I quite like the AP system idea, but then I'm a big fan of games like XCOM or Final Fantasy Tactics. I think that this can allow for very free combat turns, and an easy way for game masters to assign times to unusual tasks a player might take in combat. On the other hand, I'm a bit concerned about the initiative system. The idea of getting an extra action with high initiative is fine, but from there, it seems like you're punished for rolling high. Since you will then be choosing your actions first, you're giving your opponents a chance to react to your actions. As far as the main selling point of simultaneous actions, I have my reservations, but I want to try using it before I naysay it. I believe it likely needs some more clarification than the few lines it gets in the book, but does it need a reworking entirely? We'll see. For the magic, I don't have much to say. It's a pretty standard system as far as spellcasting. I like the way it interacts with AP, with resources only being spent upon spending the last AP. For channeling, however, I think there will be some difficulty with balancing energy gain with effects, and I'm not sure the payoff will be there versus the ease of use of spellcasting. I look forward to trying it out. Alright, those are the initial thoughts. I'm about to start the tournament stream, shout out to any of you who are about to join at the time of recording, so I will be right back with the results after these messages.
3 days later.
Alright, so I've completed the testing. Congrats to the winner, the Archery Rogue. What do I think now that I've run it through some paces? The game is currently suffering from a lack of two things. First, as I said, is a good editor. The bones of the game are very satisfying to build with, but it's hard to get through the read in its current state. It needs someone to go through and ensure that the game is more readable. One thing of note, having both classes and spells ranked as tiers can cause confusion. I would think renaming one or the other to something descriptive will help keep people from being mixed up in what spells they have access to. Second is playtesting. The test case showed that things may not have been given enough playtime with different groups to see how they would utilize things. For example, the dodge talent single-handedly won the second round for the rogue, raising their evasion to nigh untouchable levels. As another example which pushed the rogue to victory, differences in move speed can render a melee combatant useless. Consider a character with speed 10 and one with speed 15. If they start right next to each other, the melee fighter gets only a single turn to strike before the rogue can completely separate themselves from the melee combatant, permanently. This is due to the multiplicative movement rule. A single run action will shoot that 15-foot mover 75 feet, while the 10-footer only moves 50. The melee person would need to do another 3 AP run action in order to close the gap for the next round. But if the 15er uses a 2 AP move, the 10er only ends up gaining 5 feet on it. It becomes effectively impossible for equivalent level characters to be caught unless they allow it to happen. So what you end up with is a sort of loose weapon triangle, like you would find in Fire Emblem. A dodgy ranged combatant will well counter a melee fighter, while a spellcaster will be able to counter their range and high EV. That spellcaster, though, will likely be soft enough that the melee fighter can squish them with just a hit or two. These are things which, if not desired, can be easily remedied. In fact, since I ran my tests, the dodge ability has been fixed to giving only a bonus of 5 to evasion, rather than potentially hundreds from your dexterity. So it is clear that this is being actively worked on, having its kinks ironed out. As for something I liked, the character creation is fantastic. I loved the process of crafting out characters with this tiered class system. It felt smooth, if a bit crunchy. I also quite enjoyed the AP system. It felt like a strong way to get away from the standard move, action, bonus turn structure you usually see. It allows for very creative turns. The simultaneous combat, on the other hand, is a bit lackluster. Not in terms of the idea, but in the implementation. It needs a mechanic of secretly deciding what actions you will take. Otherwise, people with an early initiative are punished by those with lower initiative being able to react to their choices. And since even being killed during the round won't stop their actions from happening, there is no benefit to getting the early action choice. In truth, it needs more guidelines in general for the simultaneous turn structure. Right now, it's just your GM will figure it out, which isn't terribly helpful. I would also love to see a way to call an audible mid-turn, to shift gears at some penalty and react to a thing which is happening. So, should you back this game? Being honest, I'm torn on this. If you are someone who enjoys freeform character creation, or who enjoys video games like XCOM or Final Fantasy Tactics, you will probably be satisfied by this game. If you listened to my description of the mechanics of the game and found them interesting, and aren't turned off by large complex numbers, this is likely a game you will enjoy. As it stands, however, there is a lot of work yet needed to get the content into a package which is ready for use. They are definitely doing that work, trying to get the game tuned up, but that makes it hard to do a final call on what the quality of the game will be, as there is no telling what could shake out during the playtesting and revising process. But if you were intrigued by the quick description of the game, you can likely feel confident enough to back it. If you prefer a streamlined system, however, one which favors narrative elements over mechanical crunch, this is not the game for you. Alright, those are my thoughts. You can find a link to the Kickstarter in the description or by scanning this QR code. Thank you for tuning in to my rambling thoughts on this game, and thank you to the creators for supplying me with your early access copy. I wish you the best of luck on your Kickstarter project. If you enjoyed this and want to hear about more tabletop games, consider liking and subscribing. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. If I can. Anyway, thank you again for tuning in, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.